So there are some types. PR guests, yeah, guests are great. Both sound good. How to varieties team. One thing, if you're going to do, it's best from my experience and for what I've seen on there. If you do solo, you do solo all the way through. If you're going to do a team, you do team all the way through. But yes, you can invite a solo, you can invite guests or even co-hosts, invite a guest on, and we'll actually talk about guests on a little bit too. We'll even talk about that a bit. Things you need to think about. Things you need to think about when you are going out there and deciding you want to do this. So let's talk about some types now. Okay. So one of the things you could do in your programming is, do you want to do interviews? And interviews are really popular. There are lots of podcasts out there that every episode they bring someone in, a guest. Now, and this is good, but there are a couple of things you really need to do if you're going to do interviews. So things you need to think about. You can't just simply invite someone and say, hey, come on and let's talk. It reminds me of this radio episode on WMAL about this this company that does cabinets and desktops and kitchen tops, kitchen countertops, etc. They had a guest on to talk about skylights. And, you could tell, and I was listening to it, and you could tell that after about 5 or 6 minutes of conversation, they ran out of things to talk about because there wasn't a hell of a lot to talk about installing and maintaining skylights. So when you do an interview, you really need to think it through. You need to do research, find out about the topic. You don't need to become an expert on the topic, but you need to really understand the topic a little bit, and you might have a series of questions you might want to ask the person you're interviewing. So for example, when I do interviews, and I don't do a lot of interviews, but I do them periodically, I always ask for a short bio, just kind of like was asked for me today. And I'll have a series of questions, such as, depending on what focus I want from them. So maybe I might ask them, what is the latest article or book they've read on the subject in dealing with the topic at hand? Maybe it's about training or learning. What was the best experience? What was the worst experience? What advice would you give to someone starting out in the business? So you need to have kind of a series of questions. It doesn't mean you have to follow the questions in exact order, or you must just question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. You can let it flow a bit depending upon how things are going. So if you're going to do interviews, you have to do some research, have a logical progression of questions, maybe some simple ones. Oh, tell us a little bit about yourself, or where did you grow up, that sort of thing, getting down to the end. One thing about interviews is you should always have more questions than you think you're going to need, because you never quite know if you're going to get that guest who you think is going to spend a lot of time talking to you, wind up giving you lots of yes, no, not certain type of answers. Okay. So think about that. Next, scripted nonfiction. That's kind of what I do, is more scripted nonfiction. A lot of my topics are based on my observations of what I see in the business world and training, as well as reading the professional literature. So I had a podcast at the beginning of September called "It Is Awesome." And that awesome was all based on my observation of a very young and inexperienced trainer who kept using the phrase awesome whenever something went right. And within probably an hour's worth of time, she had used the word awesome at least 20 times. And although she didn't notice it, and maybe the participants didn't notice, I, as a professional trainer, noticed it. You might want to do news recap and opinion. That's always very popular. Glean the stories from the newspapers, glean the stories from the internet. What are the hot topics? And you can just ramble on about them. That's something you can do, or a combination, educational podcasts. A lot of them I scripted are really educational, something for people to think about. That's one of the kind of the lines at the very end that I use as I'm talking about something, maybe in training or business or being a consultant. And at the end, I always kind of say many times, something to think about. So that hopefully people get to think about as they do their business, as they train, they keep some of these points in mind. And scripted fiction, people write stories. It could be horror stories, it could be novellas, whatever it is. They're all about doing some scripted sort of stories, etc.